They say every city has secrets. But what if I told you there's one secret that connects them all? A pattern so obvious, yet so carefully hidden, that millions walk past it every single day without noticing. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories or urban legends. I'm talking about something real, something documented, something that once you see it, you can never unsee it. 3 months ago, I stumbled upon a detail in my own neighborhood that led me down a rabbit hole I never expected to find. It started with a simple question. Why do certain buildings in completely different cities share the exact same architectural flaw? Not similar, identical. I'm talking about the same misplaced window, the same oddly positioned door, the same structural quirk that makes no logical sense. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But then I found the second one, then the third, then the 20th. And that's when I realized someone had been leaving breadcrumbs. The deeper I dug, the stranger it became. Security footage that mysteriously corrupted at the same timestamp across multiple locations. Construction permits filed under companies that didn't exist. Architects who disappeared from public records entirely. I started documenting everything, mapping it out, connecting dots that shouldn't connect. What I found wasn't just interesting, it was impossible to ignore. And here's the thing. This isn't happening in some remote corner of the world. It's happening in major cities, in places you've probably been to, in buildings you've probably walked past. The evidence is everywhere, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally connect the pieces. Today I'm going to show you everything I've discovered. But I need you to pay attention, because once we go down this path, there's no going back. Welcome back to the channel that unveils what no one talks about. If you're new here, this is where we dive deep into the mysteries that mainstream media won't touch, the patterns that academics ignore, and the questions that make people uncomfortable. I don't do this for views or clicks. I do this because someone needs to ask these questions, and apparently, that someone is me. Before we get into today's investigation, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious because what I'm about to share with you might be happening in your hometown right now, and you just don't know it yet. Seriously, pause the video for a second and leave a comment. Tell me where you're from. It'll make sense why I'm asking in about 10 minutes. Now, let me take you back to where this all started. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was walking home from work through downtown. I've taken this route 1,000 times, but that day something caught my eye. There's this old building on 5th Street built in the 1920s. Classic Art Deco style, beautiful craftsmanship. But on the north face, about 3 stories up, there's a window. Just one window, smaller than all the others, positioned in a spot that makes absolutely no architectural sense. It's not aligned with any floor. It's not symmetrical with the building's design. And from the inside, according to the building's floor plans that I later accessed, it doesn't connect to any room. It's just there, serving no apparent purpose. I took a photo, posted it on a local architecture forum, expecting someone to explain it away as a ventilation shaft or some quirky 1920s design choice. Instead, I got a message from someone claiming they'd seen the exact same window in Chicago, same size, same positioning, same inexplicable placement. I didn't believe them at first, but they sent photos. Then another person chimed in from Seattle, then Boston, then Atlanta, all reporting the same architectural anomaly in buildings constructed during the same decade. That's when I knew I had stumbled onto something. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Someone, or some group, had embedded this feature into buildings across the country for a reason. And I was going to find out why. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this investigation is going to take us places you won't believe. We're about to uncover what they've been hiding for almost a century. The first thing I did was create a database. I know that sounds boring, but stay with me because this is where it gets interesting. I started cataloging every building with this anomalous window that people reported to me. Within 2 weeks, I had documented 47 buildings across 32 cities, all constructed between 1921 and 1929, all designed by different architectural firms, all with this exact same feature that served no apparent functional purpose. But here's where the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every single one of these buildings was located within 3 blocks of a city's main telegraph office. In the 1920s, telegraph offices were the nerve centers of urban communication. They were how information traveled, how news spread, how business was conducted. And someone had very deliberately placed these strange buildings in their immediate vicinity. I started pulling construction records, building permits, ownership documents, anything I could find in public archives and city hall basements. What I discovered was shocking. 23 of these buildings were financed by a company called Continental Development Trust. I tried to research this company, and here's the thing. It barely exists in historical records. There's no substantial documentation about who owned it, who ran it, or what happened to it. The company appears in building permits and financial documents from 1921 to 1929, and then it just vanishes. No dissolution records, no bankruptcy filings, no transfer of assets. It's as if someone carefully erased it from history, leaving only these breadcrumbs in scattered municipal archives. I managed to track down one newspaper article from 1926 that mentioned Continental Development Trust. It was a tiny mention in the business section of a Philadelphia paper, noting that the company had acquired property near the city center. The article mentioned the company president's name, Edmund Carver. I spent 3 days searching for any information about Edmund Carver. Birth records, death records, census data, military records, immigration documents, anything. Nothing. The man doesn't exist in any meaningful historical record. It's as if Edmund Carver was a ghost, a placeholder name used to sign documents that needed a signature. But ghosts don't build buildings. Someone real was behind this. Someone with resources, connections, and a very specific agenda. I decided to shift my approach. Instead of focusing on who built these buildings, I started investigating what happened in them. I reached out to current building owners, longtime tenants, historical societies, anyone who might have institutional memory about these properties. Most people had nothing interesting to report, but then I heard from an elderly woman in Cincinnati named Dorothy Martinez. Dorothy's grandfather had worked as a maintenance supervisor in one of these buildings from 1927 until it closed in 1931. According to stories Dorothy heard as a child, her grandfather had discovered something unusual during a routine repair. Behind a wall on the 3rd floor, accessible only through that strange, out-of-place window, was a small room. The room contained equipment that her grandfather didn't recognize, wires running through the walls in directions that made no sense, and a logbook filled with numbers and codes. Her grandfather reported it to the building owner, who assured him it was old telegraph equipment that had been decommissioned. But her grandfather never believed that explanation. The equipment looked too sophisticated, too unusual, and it was actively maintained. Someone was accessing that room regularly, and they weren't using the main building entrance to do it. Dorothy didn't know what happened to the logbook or the equipment. After her grandfather died in 1974, his personal effects were lost in a house fire. But the story stuck with me because it confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. These buildings weren't just buildings. They were infrastructure for something else entirely. Something that required proximity to telegraph communications. Something that needed to be hidden in plain sight. I needed more evidence. Something concrete that could prove these buildings were part of a coordinated system. That's when I decided to do something that, in retrospect, was probably not my smartest move. I broke into one of them. Well, broke into is a strong term. I prefer gained unauthorized access for journalistic purposes. The building I chose was in Detroit, currently abandoned and scheduled for demolition in 6 months. If there was ever a time to investigate without causing real problems, this was it. I brought a friend named Marcus who's good with a camera and better at staying calm in questionable situations. We entered through a ground floor window that had been broken years ago, and we made our way up to the 3rd floor where the anomalous window was located. The building was in rough shape, water damage, crumbling plaster, graffiti covering most surfaces. But when we found the wall where that window was positioned, something was different. While everything around us was decaying, this wall was oddly intact. The plaster wasn't crumbling. There was no water damage, no graffiti. It was as if someone had been maintaining this specific section of the building while letting everything else deteriorate. Marcus started recording as I examined the wall. I noticed something immediately. The seams didn't match the rest of the construction. This wall had been added later, probably in the 1930s or 1940s, covering something that had been there originally. I found a loose section near the baseboard and carefully pulled it away. Behind it was another wall, older, with different materials. And in that older wall was a small door, maybe 3 feet tall, positioned exactly where that window was on the exterior. My hands were shaking as I opened the door. Inside was a space about 6 feet deep and 8 feet wide. It wasn't a room exactly, more like a shaft that ran vertically through the building. And inside this shaft were remnants of what Dorothy's grandfather had described: equipment mounts, rusted brackets, wires running through conduits that disappeared into the ceiling and floor. Most of the equipment itself was gone, removed decades ago, but someone had left something behind, probably by accident. Wedged behind one of the conduits was a metal plate, about the size of a license plate with engraved text: Property of Federal Communications Research Division. Authorized personnel only. Installation 23B, 1927. I took photos of everything: the plate, the shaft, the equipment mounts, all of it. Marcus was recording the whole time, his camera capturing details I might have missed. As we were documenting, Marcus noticed something I hadn't. The conduits running through the ceiling weren't just going up. They were angled, heading toward the direction of the old telegraph office 3 blocks away. Someone had been running lines between this building and that telegraph office, and they'd done it in a way that wasn't part of the building's official construction plans. We needed to leave. We'd been there too long already. But before we did, I pulled that metal plate from its hiding place. It was evidence, and I wasn't about to leave it behind. As we were climbing back down to the ground floor, we heard something that made us freeze. Voices outside and the sound of a vehicle pulling up to the building. We quickly found a place to hide in what used to be a janitor's closet and waited. Through a crack in the door, I could see 2 people entering the building with flashlights. They weren't police, no uniforms, no marked vehicle. They were dressed in plain clothes, moving with purpose, heading directly to the 3rd floor. We couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language suggested they were searching for something. After about 20 minutes, they left, and we waited another 30 minutes before we risked moving. When we finally got out of that building and into Marcus's car, neither of us said anything for a solid 5 minutes. Then Marcus looked at me and said, "We're not crazy, right? That just happened?" I looked at the metal plate sitting in my lap and replied, "Yeah, that definitely just happened, and I think we just kicked a hornet's nest." The next morning, I did something that would either validate everything I'd discovered or make me look like a complete fool. I called the Federal Communications Commission. Not their main line, I knew that would go nowhere, but I managed to find a direct number for their Historical Records Department. I spoke with a researcher named Janet, who initially sounded annoyed by my call, but became very interested when I mentioned the Federal Communications Research Division. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Janet said something that changed everything. "Where did you hear that name?" I explained what I'd found: the buildings, the window patterns, the hidden shafts, the metal plate. Janet was quiet for a moment, then said she needed to call me back. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It wasn't Janet. It was someone who identified himself as Robert Chen from the FCC's Office of General Counsel. Robert was polite but firm. He asked me to describe exactly what I'd found and where. I told him about the Detroit building and the metal plate. Robert's response was carefully worded. "Mister, what you've discovered relates to a historical communications project that was declassified in 1992, but never publicly disclosed due to limited interest. What you're calling the Federal Communications Research Division was an early experimental program for signal relay and communications monitoring conducted between 1921 and 1931. The program was discontinued and its infrastructure was decommissioned. The buildings you've identified were part of that infrastructure." I asked why this had never been in any history books, why there was no public record of it. Robert's answer was unsatisfying. The project was considered a failure and wasn't deemed historically significant enough to document extensively. Most of the records were destroyed in the 1950s, during a routine purge of obsolete files. But here's what bothered me. If this was just an abandoned, historically insignificant project, why was the Office of General Counsel calling me? Why did they care what some random YouTuber found in an abandoned building? I pressed Robert on this, and his tone shifted slightly. He asked me if I still had the metal plate. I lied and said no, that I'd left it in the building. Robert seemed relieved. He then strongly suggested that I discontinue my investigation, noting that some of the buildings I'd identified were structurally unstable and that unauthorized entry could result in legal consequences. It was a warning wrapped in concern for my safety. After that call, I did what any reasonable person would do. I immediately doubled down on my investigation. I had Marcus photograph the metal plate from every angle, and I stored it somewhere safe. Then I started reaching out to historians who specialized in early telecommunications. One of them, Professor Linda Harrison from MIT, responded with interest. When I told her what I'd found, she said something fascinating. In the 1920s, there was a lot of experimental work being done on signal interception and relay. The government was worried about foreign intelligence using telegraph communications to gather information. If what you're describing is real, this could have been an early domestic surveillance network. A domestic surveillance network. In the 1920s, decades before anyone thought our government was doing that sort of thing, Professor Harrison agreed to look at my documentation. When I sent her the photos of the metal plate and the shaft in Detroit, her response was immediate. This is significant. The technical specifications of those equipment mounts suggest this was far more sophisticated than anything that should have existed in 1927. Someone was using technology that was ahead of its time. I asked her if she'd be willing to go on record with this assessment. She hesitated, then agreed with one condition. I had to find at least one more piece of physical evidence from another location. She didn't want to stake her professional reputation on a single finding that could be explained away as anomalous. So that's exactly what I set out to do. I identified another building in Philadelphia that was currently under renovation, meaning I could potentially gain legitimate access. I contacted the construction company handling the renovation and explained that I was a journalist researching historical architecture. Surprisingly, they agreed to let me tour the building. When I arrived in Philadelphia 2 days later, I met with the site supervisor, a guy named Tom who'd been working in construction for 30 years. I asked him if they'd encountered anything unusual during the renovation. Tom laughed and said, "Unusual? Let me show you something weird." He took me to the 3rd floor to a section where they'd been stripping walls down to the studs. Behind one wall, they'd found a vertical shaft identical to what I'd seen in Detroit. But this one still had equipment in it. Old, rusted, but definitely still there. Tom said they'd reported it to the building owner, who'd hired a specialist to remove it. That specialist was scheduled to arrive the next day. I asked if I could photograph the equipment before it was removed, and Tom, bless him, said sure, as long as I didn't touch anything. I spent the next hour documenting everything. The equipment was unlike anything I'd seen in historical photos of 1920s telegraph technology. There were components that looked more like early computing equipment, with complex wiring and what appeared to be primitive circuit boards. I found another metal plate, this one reading Installation 07D 1926. Before I left, I asked Tom what he thought it was. He shrugged and said, "Above my pay grade, but I'll tell you this. In 30 years of construction, I've never seen anything like it. And the weird part? The owner seemed really anxious to get it removed quickly and quietly. Usually, if you find historical stuff, they want to preserve it, or at least document it properly. Not this time. As I was leaving the building, a black SUV pulled up. 2 people got out dressed in business casual attire carrying equipment cases. They didn't look like construction specialists. They looked like government contractors. I didn't stick around to ask questions. By now, I had enough evidence to go public with the full story. I had documentation of over 50 buildings, testimony from Dorothy about her grandfather's discovery, photos of equipment and installation plates from 2 separate locations, and an on-record statement from Professor Harrison confirming the significance of what I'd found. I spent 3 weeks putting together a comprehensive video presentation, documenting everything, creating maps, showing the patterns. The video was detailed, well-researched, and I thought, pretty damn compelling. I titled it The Hidden Network: How the Government Surveilled Americans in the 1920s, and uploaded it on a Tuesday evening. What happened next was both validating and deeply concerning. The video exploded. Within 48 hours, it had over 2 million views. People were sending me photos of similar buildings in their cities, confirming the pattern. Local news stations started picking up the story. A few journalists reached out wanting to investigate further, but then things got weird. On the 3rd day after I posted the video, my YouTube account received a copyright strike from an organization called Historical Infrastructure Preservation Foundation. They claimed I'd used their proprietary images without permission. The thing is, I hadn't. Every photo in my video was either taken by me, provided by viewers with permission, or from public domain sources. I disputed the claim immediately. That same day, I received an email from someone claiming to be a lawyer representing Continental Development Trust. Yes, the same company that supposedly vanished in 1929. The email stated that I was spreading false information about their client and demanded I remove the video and issue a public retraction. The email address was generic. The letterhead looked hastily made, and when I tried to look up the law firm, it didn't exist. It was an intimidation attempt and not even a sophisticated one, but it rattled me. Then the really strange stuff started. I began noticing the same vehicle parked across from my apartment at odd hours. A gray sedan, always with someone sitting in the driver's seat. My internet connection started behaving erratically, with random disconnections and slow speeds that my service provider couldn't explain. I received a series of anonymous phone calls. No one speaking, just silence, then a hang-up. I know how this sounds. I know it sounds paranoid, like I'd fallen into the classic conspiracy theorist trap of thinking I was more important than I actually was. But Marcus noticed it too. He started experiencing similar issues after I mentioned him by name in a follow-up video. One night, Marcus called me at 2 a.m. His voice was shaking. He said someone had broken into his apartment while he was out. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. But all of his camera equipment had been moved. Not significantly, just enough to make it clear someone had gone through it. His backup drives, the ones containing all our original footage from Detroit, were missing. Just those drives. Nothing else. We met the next morning at a coffee shop. Marcus was seriously freaked out, and honestly, so was I. We'd stumbled onto something that someone wanted to keep hidden, and that someone had resources. The question was, how far were they willing to go? Professor Harrison called me that afternoon. She sounded stressed. She told me that MIT had received a communication from a government agency, she wouldn't say which one, expressing concerns about her involvement in my investigation. They hadn't explicitly told her to stop, but the message was clear. She apologized, but said she couldn't continue to be publicly associated with my work. She'd send me her analysis in writing, but she couldn't go on camera or attach her name to it. I understood. She had a career to protect, and I wasn't going to ask her to sacrifice that. But it confirmed what I already suspected. This was bigger than I'd realized, and I was making powerful people very uncomfortable. The video remained up despite the bogus copyright claim. YouTube reviewed it and found in my favor. My subscriber count had jumped to over 500,000. People were invested in this story now, which meant I had some protection through visibility. It's harder to silence someone when 500,000 people are watching. I decided to push forward, but more carefully. I stopped mentioning specific locations that I planned to investigate. I started using encrypted communications for sensitive conversations. I moved my backup files to multiple secure locations. If someone wanted to stop this story, they were going to have to work a lot harder. Then I received an unexpected message. It came through an anonymous email service, and it read, "You're asking the right questions, but you're looking in the wrong place. The buildings were just the beginning. If you want to understand what Continental Development Trust really was, look into who benefited from the stock market crash of 1929. The network wasn't for surveillance. It was for something much more profitable. Meet me at the place where it all started if you want proof. You'll know what I mean." The message was cryptic, but I understood it. The place where it all started was that building on 5th Street in my own city, the one where I first noticed the strange window. Someone wanted to meet me there, someone who claimed to have answers. It could be a trap, it could be a crank, or it could be someone who actually knew what this was all about. I brought Marcus with me, obviously. If I was walking into a trap, at least I'd have a witness. We arrived at the 5th Street building at dusk, as the anonymous message had specified. The building was still operational, housing offices for various small businesses, and we entered through the main lobby like normal visitors. The message had specified the 3rd floor, northwest corner, after hours. We waited in a nearby coffee shop until the building mostly emptied out around 7 p.m., then headed up. The 3rd floor was quiet, the hallway lights dimmed for the evening. We made our way to the northwest corner, where that strange window was located. There was an unmarked door, probably a storage closet or utility space. I knocked twice, as the message had instructed. The door opened immediately. The person standing there was not what I expected. She was elderly, probably in her 80s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that suggested a mind still fully engaged with the world. She looked at us briefly, nodded, and gestured for us to come inside. The room was indeed a storage space filled with old filing cabinets and boxes. But in the back corner, she'd set up a small folding table with a chair. On the table was a weathered leather folder. "My name is Eleanor," she said without preamble. "My father was Edmund Carver." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Edmund Carver, the ghost, the placeholder name, was real, and his daughter was standing in front of me. Eleanor must have seen the shock on my face because she smiled slightly. Yes, he was real. And yes, he built those buildings, though not for the reason you think. She opened the leather folder and pulled out a series of documents, original building plans, financial records, and photographs from the 1920s. "My father wasn't working for the government," Eleanor continued. "He was working against them, in a manner of speaking. In the early 1920s, my father was a telegraph operator who noticed something unusual. Certain high-level financial communications, messages between banks, investment firms, powerful individuals, were being intercepted and copied by government operatives. This was before such surveillance was legal or even acknowledged. My father believed this information was being used to manipulate financial markets, to give certain connected individuals advance warning of economic shifts." She pulled out a photograph of a man in his 30s, serious-faced, standing in front of one of the buildings I'd documented. My father decided to create his own network. Continental Development Trust was his company, funded by a small group of wealthy individuals who shared his concerns about government overreach. The buildings were designed to intercept the interceptors, if you will. They monitored government surveillance activities, documenting who was being watched, what information was being gathered, and how it was being used. This was not the story I'd expected. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Eleanor continued. "The network operated from 1921 until late 1929. My father's team documented extensive evidence of government operatives using intercepted financial intelligence for personal gain and to manipulate markets. He planned to go public with this information in the autumn of 1929, but then the stock market crashed, and in the chaos that followed, his evidence became politically impossible to release. Who would believe that government surveillance had contributed to the crash? Who would care about communication privacy when millions had lost their savings?" She pulled out a newspaper clipping from October 1929, showing the market crash headlines. "My father was visited by men in the government, he never told me which agency, who made it clear that releasing his evidence would be considered an act of treason. They claimed national security concerns, said his network had compromised sensitive intelligence operations. He was given a choice: dismantle everything quietly and disappear, or face prosecution." Eleanor's voice remained steady, but I could hear the pain underneath. He chose to protect his family. He shut down Continental Development Trust, removed or disabled most of the equipment, and scattered his team. He burned most of his records and lived the rest of his life under a different name in a small town in Montana. He died in 1968 without ever telling his full story publicly. I asked the obvious question, "Why are you telling me this now?" Eleanor looked at me directly. "Because my father kept one set of records. Original surveillance logs from 1927 to 1929, showing exactly who was intercepting what communications and how that information was used. He kept them as insurance, as protection against those who wanted to silence him. Before he died, he gave them to me and made me promise that if the truth ever started to come out, if someone ever started asking the right questions, I would make sure those records reached the public." She pushed the leather folder across the table toward me. "You're asking the right questions. These records are now yours to do with as you see fit. But I need you to understand something. The people who wanted this hidden in 1929 are gone, but institutions have long memories. When you release this information, there will be consequences. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at Marcus, who gave me a slight nod. I looked back at Eleanor. "I think we're already facing consequences. Might as well make them count for something." Eleanor smiled, genuinely this time. "You remind me of my father. Stubborn, idealistic, and probably too brave for your own good." She stood to leave, but before she did, she said one more thing. "Those men you've noticed following you, they're not government. The government doesn't care about an old surveillance network from a century ago, but there are private interests, descendants of the people who benefited from that market manipulation, who very much care about keeping this quiet. They have money, connections, and motivation. Be careful who you trust." Then she left, disappearing down the hall, leaving Marcus and me standing there with a folder full of century-old secrets that apparently still mattered to someone in the present day. The weight of what we were holding was almost physical. We didn't open the folder there. We went straight to Marcus's apartment. which felt safer than my own at this point, and spread everything out on his dining room table. What Eleanor had given us was extraordinary. There were original surveillance logs, handwritten, documenting hundreds of intercepted communications between government operatives and various financial entities. There were decoded messages showing advanced knowledge of major stock movements in the days and weeks before the 1929 crash. There were names. Some I recognized from history books as major financiers of that era, others unknown to me but clearly important. There were photographs of documents that appeared to be government communications discussing information advantages and strategic positioning. The most damning piece was a ledger showing payments made by government officials to various bank accounts, coinciding with major market activities. This wasn't just surveillance. This was evidence of systematic corruption, of using government power for personal financial gain, of having advanced knowledge that the market was about to collapse, and using that information to profit while ordinary people lost everything. But here's the thing. All of this happened in 1929, almost a century ago. Everyone directly involved was long dead. So why did anyone care if this came out now? Marcus asked the same question. I thought about what Eleanor had said about descendants and institutions. Then it clicked. It's not about the people, I said. It's about the institutions. Some of these banks, these financial firms, they still exist. Maybe not under the same names, but the entities that benefited from that crash, that profited from having inside information. Their successor institutions are still around. And if we can prove that their wealth, their power, was built on corruption and market manipulation, Marcus finished my thought. Then we're not just exposing history, we're potentially undermining the legitimacy of present-day financial institutions. We spent the next week digitizing everything, creating encrypted backups, and sending copies to multiple secure locations. I also sent a complete set to a lawyer with instructions to release everything if anything happened to me. Maybe I was being paranoid, but Eleanor's warning had been clear. Then I did something that would either be brilliant or incredibly stupid. I reached out to Professor Harrison again and asked if she could connect me with an investigative journalist at a major newspaper, someone who specialized in financial corruption. If this story was going to come out, it needed to be told properly, with the weight of institutional journalism behind it. Professor Harrison connected me with a reporter named Sarah Chen at the Washington Post. Sarah had broken several major financial corruption stories and had a reputation for being thorough, careful, and most importantly, fearless. When I explained what I had, she was on a plane to meet me within 2 days. Sarah arrived with a team, another reporter, a photographer, and a documentary videographer. We spent 3 days going through everything. She verified the documents, consulted with historians and forensic document experts, cross-referenced names with historical records, and built a comprehensive picture of what Edmund Carver had documented almost a century ago. Sarah's assessment was clear. This is one of the most significant historical discoveries related to the 1929 crash that I've ever seen. If we can verify all of it, and so far, everything checks out, this will rewrite some major historical narratives about that period. But you're right to be worried. The financial institutions descended from these entities have enormous power. They'll fight this publication with everything they have. I asked her if the Post would still run the story. She smiled. Are you kidding? This is exactly the kind of story we exist to tell, but we need to be absolutely bulletproof. Every fact triple-checked, every document authenticated, every claim backed by multiple sources. It's going to take time to do this right. We agreed on a plan. Sarah's team would spend the next 6 weeks preparing a comprehensive investigative piece. Meanwhile, I would continue my YouTube documentation, providing updates to my audience about the general direction of the investigation, without revealing the specifics of Eleanor's documents. This would maintain public interest and provide some protection through visibility. The week after Sarah left, things escalated. I received a formal cease and desist letter from a law firm that actually existed, representing an investment bank. The letter claimed I was making defamatory statements about their institution and demanded I remove all content related to my investigation. The thing was, I hadn't mentioned this bank specifically in any of my videos, which meant they knew what was in Eleanor's documents. They knew what was coming. I forwarded the letter to Sarah and to my lawyer. My lawyer's response was interesting. They're scared. If they weren't, they'd ignore you. The fact that they're engaging legally means they think you have something real. 2 days later, Marcus's car was broken into. Again, nothing stolen, but the message was clear. We know where you are, We can access your space." Then I received a phone call from an unknown number. When I answered, a calm, professional voice said, "Mister, I represent certain interests that are concerned about the direction of your investigation. We'd like to propose a meeting to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." I asked what kind of arrangement. The voice continued, "You've clearly invested significant time and resources into this project. We appreciate thorough research. However, we believe you may have some misconceptions about certain historical events. We'd like to provide you with additional context and perhaps compensate you for your time and effort." It was a buyout offer. They were trying to pay me to stop. I told them I wasn't interested and hung up. Marcus looked at me like I was crazy. "Do you know how much money they might have offered?" I shrugged. "Doesn't matter, some stories are worth more than money." But inside I was terrified. Because if they were offering money and that didn't work, what would they try next? The Washington Post published their investigation on a Monday morning. The headline read, "Newly discovered documents reveal government financial collusion before 1929 crash." The article was 40 pages long, meticulously documented, featuring reproductions of Edmund Carver's surveillance logs, expert analysis, and interviews with historians. It was front-page news, and it was devastating. Within hours, other major outlets picked up the story. Cable news was running segments. Social media exploded. My YouTube channel gained another 1 million subscribers in a single day. Eleanor's century-old secret was now public knowledge. The financial institutions named in the documents immediately went into crisis management mode. They issued statements claiming the documents were forgeries, that the events described were taken out of historical context, that modern institutions bore no responsibility for actions taken by completely different entities nearly a century ago. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Post had verified everything. Other historians began coming forward, saying these documents filled in gaps they'd long wondered about. Government archivists confirmed that certain records from that era had mysteriously disappeared decades ago, and these documents potentially explained why. 3 days after publication, a prominent financial historian at Columbia University published a paper analyzing the documents and concluded they were authentic and represented a missing piece of the puzzle in understanding the systemic corruption that contributed to the 1929 financial collapse. But the real vindication came from an unexpected source. A former government archivist, retired for 15 years, published an op-ed in the New York Times. He revealed that in the 1970s, during his time at the National Archives, he'd discovered references to a communications monitoring controversy from the 1920s that had been deliberately removed from official records. He'd been told at the time that it was related to national security, and he should forget about it. Now, with Edmund Carver's documents public, he realized what he'd stumbled upon. Within 2 weeks, congressional hearings were announced. Not about the 1929 events themselves, everyone involved was long dead, but about the systematic destruction of historical records and the role of government agencies in concealing corruption. Modern financial institutions were called to testify about their institutional history and whether they come